Good evening, church. That sounded like about 3 people. Good evening, church. Thank you very much. I know I'm loud when I have a mic and you're not as loud, but got to make sure you're awake. You know, it's Sunday. I know this afternoon a bunch of you slept. I can see it in your eyes. We got to make sure that you're active, that you're ready to go. I want to say that here lately with Sadie and I, there have been certain things that have come up in our life, and obviously her uncle's whole ordeal with his liver and the transplant and all that stuff going down. And then obviously her graduating from pharmacy school yesterday. I just want you to know that we feel your love very much right now. Like, we've gotten so many cards and texts and calls. And I want you to know as sincerely as I can possibly say it, that we love you more than words could describe. And that every time I get frustrated with how things are going, or I feel like things aren't going as well as I would like for them to go, I'm reminded, because you do something just amazing like that. Like, you reach out to us and you make us feel very, very special. And so thank you guys so much for your love and your support, your prayers, and just your encouragement and all the things that you guys are. And if we were to go around the room, I'm sure most of us in here have a story of some kind about how somebody in this congregation, probably a lot of somebody's, encouraged you. And we're not going to do that, but you know that's the case as well as I do. When you've gone through things, this is just a place that loves on you and lets you know that somebody's in your corner and that somebody's praying for you and thinking about you. So it just means so much to us, and we appreciate you more than words could ever say. And I've never said this. I've never said this from the pulpit from up here. But when I moved here, however many years ago that's been now, I think this August will be 6 years that I've been here full time. And obviously, Sadie started attending not long after that, about the same time. And then obviously, she moved here as well. But when I first moved here almost 6 years ago, I'll be honest with you, the intention was not to be here forever. The intention was to be here for a time and to learn and grow and then just kind of see where it goes. And I want you to know that that could not be further from the case anymore. I want you to know that because of who you are, that this is my home. Like, Shakota is home because you've made it my home. And so we just want to let you know that's where we're at. As long as you'll put up with us, we're willing to put up with you, I guess, if you want to put it that way. We just appreciate you guys so much. But before we get into our message tonight, let's go ahead and pray. Pray to God over this message. So, God, thank you so much for a chance that we have to be together tonight. And God, we have this privilege so often that, God, I think we forget to stop and thank you for it. And God, just the chance that we have to be together and to encourage and to lift up. And Father, as we get ready to dig into your word, God, we know that your word will always create change in our heart. And it will always create goodness. And it will always create so many amazing things in our life and our heart if we'll just let it. And Father, as we get ready to dig into your word tonight, that's our prayer. Our prayer is that you will help us to be looking for what we need to hear. Father, we know it's not easy to hear things that we need to hear sometimes, but Father, that's our prayer tonight, for open hearts that are ready to receive your word. God, I pray for hunger. I pray that we hunger for righteousness. I pray that we thirst for your word and thirst for all that you have in store for us. And Father, I just pray that you be with me tonight, and I pray that you help me to preach your word in such a way, Father, that takes all the eyes off of me and puts them on you. God, we just love you so much, and we're thankful for a chance we have tonight to get to tell you how good you are and hopefully to build each other up in the process. And it's through your Son's name that we pray and give thanks. Amen. I know I've asked you similar questions to this before, but I think it's appropriate that we start tonight with a similar question to one that I've asked you before. How many of you can think of an event or a situation, a conversation, something that happened in your life, and you would give anything in the world to go back and change the outcome? How many of us? By a show of hands, several of us, right? Most all of us. Can I just be honest with you today? Like, I'm just in that kind of mood where we're just going to kind of have a conversation here, and I think we're going to hopefully grow together in all this conversation we're going to have tonight as we talk about 4 facts about fools. How many of you, when you think about those situations, you think about maybe those conversations and the way that you handled yourself in that conversation? Or you think about a situation where you had the opportunity, like you had the opportunity right there in front of you to do something or say something that could have made a positive difference. But rather than say something or do something or be something that would have created a positive difference for the person you were around, instead you mishandled it and you created the very opposite of positivity in the situation. like I said, conversations, all of us have conversations that if we could go back in time, we would change them, right? We would change the way we conduct ourselves. We would change the things that we say. We would change the way we go about the conversation. All of us have been there. And we have situations, not only conversations. Maybe it's a decision that you've made in your life. Maybe you can think back to a time in your life where there was something really, really big going on. And maybe it's not some huge thing. Maybe it's a small thing. But you can probably think back to a time when you were forced to make a decision that was not a very easy decision, but you were forced to make a decision nonetheless. And if you could go back and change the decision that you made, for so many of us, we probably have decisions that we would go back and we would change because we regret the decisions that we made. And it's so interesting because you think about life, that's really what life is it not? It's one big series of decisions, one after another. You make thousands of decisions every day, and sometimes we're not very good at making decisions. And this is where the whole hot thing, the whole humble, open, and transparent thing comes into play. I'll take it a step further. When I look back at my life, can't speak for you, so I don't want to do that, but I'll speak for me. There are things in my life that when I look back at them and the way that I conducted myself, the thing that I said or the things that I did, how I handled it, whatever, you name it, that I look back at it and I go, dude, how could you be so stupid? Like, how could you really be so dumb to think that that was the way you needed to do it? Or a decision that I made. And I'm like, that has got to be one of the dumbest decisions a human being has ever made. But you know the cool thing, then I read the Bible and I'm like, okay, they made some pretty dumb decisions too. And I kind of feel a little bit better about it. I see some judgmental eyes. You do it too. It makes you feel better about your dumbness when somebody else has dumbness too. That's just kind of how it is. We enjoy that together. But you look back at decisions and you look back at conversations, you look back at just situations or whatever it is in your life, and you realize how foolish it was to handle it the way that you did. Every parent that I've ever talked to, and by the way, I have absolutely no right speaking about parenting yet because I'm not a parent, although I feel like one sometimes. So I have no right to speak about parenting, but every parent that I've ever talked to, when they talk about raising kids, all of them have said something similar. And that is, they say something along the lines of, you know, I know there's no such thing as perfect parents, but I made some really big mistakes with my kids. And I say, I handled my kids in a really foolish way sometimes. And by the way, you're a human being. You are going to make mistakes, and there's not such a thing as a perfect parent, but we all make mistakes, and we all do foolish things. That's the point that I'm trying to make. We have things, we have regrets, and we wish we could change it. And tonight, unfortunately, and you already know this, the reality of the situation is nothing I say tonight, nothing you say tonight, nothing that we sing, nothing that we pray, nothing that I preach, nothing that we do tonight allows you to go back and undo the foolishness that you have done in the past. Nothing we do can go back and undo the dumb decisions that we've already made. They've already been made, they're there, and there's nothing you can do to change it. But tonight, as we talk about 4 facts about fools, tonight is more so about recognizing what foolishness is, what it looks like, and how to do it. Okay, this isn't your typical how-to. How-to, normally you think, okay, how do I fix this, or how do I do that? Tonight is really, if you're wanting to be foolish, and you could fill in the blank when you look at that word fool. I'm using the word fool because the book of Proverbs uses the word fool so many times. You could fill in the blank. I don't know, you can say dummy, you can say idiot, you can say stupid person. I don't care. You fill in the blank with whatever you think kind of reaches you where you're at. But tonight we're talking about 4 facts about fools, 4 facts about foolish people. And hopefully as we look at these, they can help you not undo the dumb things that you've already done, the foolish things that you've already done. Hopefully they'll help you not do more foolish things in the future. Does that make sense? That's kind of our goal tonight. 4 facts about fools. And I love Proverbs, by the way. I love Proverbs so much. And you say that about everything you ever talk about ever. Every Bible verse you've ever said, you say you love it. I know. I do that. Okay, I love them all. But there's something special about Proverbs because Proverbs is a book that's really, really straightforward. It's kind of like James. You know what I mean? Like, it's a book that just makes sense. It's a book that you don't have to be some deep theological thinker in order to understand what Proverbs is talking about. It's really straightforward, and it really makes sense if you just read it. And so you can go ahead and turn to Proverbs tonight. I would love it if you would turn there with us. And of course, you know that these scriptures are going to be up here on the screen. We'd love it if you'd look at it in your Bible. We're going to, as we look tonight at 4 facts about fools to hopefully help us avoid being fools in the future. 4 facts about fools. Here's fact number 1. Fools hang around fools. Fools hang around fools. If you say, Chase, what is the best way you know of to become a foolish person who makes not great decisions? You know what my response would be? Hang out with people who are foolish people and who make not such good decisions. And you've seen this, have you not? You've seen this, maybe even with your own kids or your own grandkids, or you've seen it in other situations. If you want to be foolish, okay, if you want to do dumb things, spend time with people who do dumb things. That just makes sense. And we don't like to think about it like this. But if you want to know what a person will become, or the direction at least a person's life is heading, you can look at who they spend the most time with and you get a pretty good idea. And I'm not saying that's 100%. I'm not saying that that's the case 100% of the time, every single time, because sometimes it's not. But most of the time, if you want to know what path a person is heading down, you can look at the people that they spend the most time with and you can get a pretty good idea. In Proverbs, in chapter 14, in verse 7, and again, I love the Proverbs because they're so straightforward. In Proverbs 14 and 7, it says, stay away from fools. That's pretty good advice, isn't it? Stay away from fools. That's pretty blunt and to the point. He says, stay away from fools. And he says, there's that word for, that word F-O-R, it means let me tell you why. He says, let me tell you why you stay away from fools. Because you won't find knowledge on their lips. Stay away from fools, for you won't find knowledge on their lips. It's a hard conversation to have when you're talking to people about staying away from foolish people, because the question that you get most of the time is, well, how am I ever going to reach anybody if I don't spend any time with fools? And I want to make sure we understand something, okay? When you're talking about evangelism and sharing your faith, God said to go into all the world, did He not? And preach the gospel to every creature, every person, everywhere. Preach the gospel. That's not what we're talking about right now. We're not talking about keeping the gospel message away from undeserving people, because we're all undeserving. We're not talking about keeping the gospel message away from people who make bad choices, because we've all made bad choices. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the people in your circle. Maybe that imagery kind of makes sense. Maybe that idea makes sense to you. Who are the people in your circle tonight? The people that you're closest to, the people that you spend the most time with. And you're saying, well, I go to work 8 hours a day, every single day. I can't really help who I work with. I'm not talking about even the people you work with. Although there are absolutely situations where I look at a person and I go, man, maybe you shouldn't work with those people because that's really, really hurting you. But we're not talking about the people you work with. I'm talking about the people that you put in your circle. I'm talking about the people that you choose to spend time with. I'm talking about the people that you make a conscious effort to keep your relationship going. Who is in your circle tonight? And you may have seen this next picture, but it just seems to make a lot of sense to me. Did you know that, say you have a moldy piece of fruit, and you have a perfectly good, fresh, right out of the market fruit? Guess what happens when you put the perfectly good fruit, and in this case an orange, a peach, pear, whatever that is. I haven't even taken the time to look at it really, really detailed. But if you take a good piece of fruit and you put it with a moldy piece of fruit, what happens to the good piece of fruit? It gets mold on it. It gets mold on it. If you take, and we're going to take it a step further, what if you take a moldy piece of fruit, just one moldy piece of fruit, and you put it in a basket full of perfectly good, fresh fruit? What happens to the rest of the fruit? It becomes moldy. Now you say, man, that takes a long time. It does. It takes some time. Okay, I'm not saying it's immediate, maybe not within the hour, but if it's left there, eventually the mark from that fruit will be seen in the other fruit. I can see it in your eyes. You already know where we're going with this. If you take a person that makes all the right decisions, which I would challenge you to find that person, but if you take a person who it seems like they make all the right decisions, and they do all the right things, and they really have their head on straight, and they really have goals for their life, and they really know where they want to go, and they just have it all figured out, or it seems. If you take that person and you surround them with people who are bringing them down, guess what you will be left with eventually? You will be left with a person, even though he used to make great decisions and he used to seem like he had it all figured out, eventually it wears on you and eventually it does something to that person. The best way to become foolish is to hang around foolish people. And this is where I told myself I wasn't going to get choked up talking about certain things. You've seen the same things that I've seen. How many times have you seen a young person specifically? I don't know, let's say a high school student. How many times have you seen a high school student? And when you look at them and their life, you say, man, that kid has a bright future. Like they're intelligent, they have a plan for life, like they know what they want to do, they know where they want to go to school. And it's like, man, this kid's really, really gifted. Like I said, with all the intelligence in the world and good decision making, it makes great, grades at school and all these things. How many times have you looked at a high school student and you thought they have a super great, bright future ahead of them, and then they get mixed in with the wrong people, and now you're looking at a totally different person? It happens, doesn't it? And some of you in the audience have felt the heartache of exactly what I'm talking about. You've seen a good kid become a not so great kid because they spent time with the wrong people. Because eventually, like I said, if you spend time with the wrong people, they derail the train. They take it off the tracks in the direction that their life is heading. It breaks my heart when I look at kids that have such a bright future and they spend time with the wrong people. Guys, if something as simple as fruit, something as simple as taking a moldy fruit and putting it with perfectly good fruit, if that makes it moldy, doesn't that send a message to us? If something as simple as fruit can do what it can do, doesn't that send a message to you what having the wrong influence in your life will do? And let's take it a step further. Now, this is the hard part. Let's take it a step further. How many of you know of a young man or a young woman who on any given night, peer pressure, things happen, that's what it's like to be a kid, and this applies to adults as well. How many of you know of somebody who made all the right decisions, they had a good direction in life, they were intelligent, they had a bright future, and it all came to a stop because one night they made the decision to get in the car with a drunk driver, and guess what? They never had a chance in their life to go and be all God created them to be. How many of you have seen that exact thing happen? I know that I've seen that happen. I'm talking bright kids and adults as well. I don't want to have to just be specific to kids. I say that because I've seen that situation more than I have any other, where you have a bright kid or a bright adult with a great future, a great dad, a great parent, and they make one bad decision to get in the vehicle with a drunk driver, and they never get the chance. They never get the chance to right their bad decision. A situation happened not too long ago where something very similar happened, and I won't even get into it, but I think about a situation that happened even when I was in high school. There was a kid, and at the time he was one of my brother's very closest friends. They were our next door neighbor. His name was Trace Hudson. I talked about him here, I don't remember how many years ago. I haven't talked about him since, I don't think, but he was a really cool kid. He was kind of a weird kid, but we liked him for it. You know what I mean? Like one of those guys, it's kind of strange, but you love him all the more for it. And like I said, he was one of my brother's very closest friends, and he got active in church and was doing some really, really cool things. And I had this guy that I graduated with, and I won't even say his name for the sake of him, but I have this guy that I graduated with, and there was a pretty big age difference between us and him. Trace was probably, I think, 4 years younger than me. And this guy that I graduated with is unfortunately not on the right path, to put it very lightly. But even in high school, you could tell that his ambition in life was not really to go and make something of himself. It was to go do something else. But Trace had become really good friends with this guy's younger brother, and so they spent a lot of time together, and I always hated it because I'm like, man, that's not a very good influence on him. And one day, I remember it was before church on a Wednesday night, if I'm not mistaken, and I may get hazy in the story. It's one of those things where you kind of almost forget the details because you try not to think about it. He was hanging out over at this guy I graduated with house, and they were looking at this gun, and this guy had been doing Lord knows what, and he dropped the gun, and it went off, and it shot Trace through the chest, and it killed him. And that was really, really, really tough. You can imagine how tough that was on a community like Red Oak, really small place. But that broke my heart for a lot of reasons. It broke my heart because I think, man, if only this guy wouldn't have gotten caught up with these not so great kind of people, how much differently would things look for his parents, for him? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes all it takes is a person being around the wrong kind of people. Am I saying there's a single person in the world that we shouldn't love enough to teach about Christ? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I'm talking about, again, who's in your circle. Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 16, I think, speaks really, really clearly about exactly what we're talking about. In verse 16, he says, "The wise are cautious and avoid danger, but fools plunge ahead with reckless confidence." I want to read that again because I think it just speaks so clearly. The wise are cautious and avoid danger, but fools plunge ahead with reckless confidence. That just makes sense, doesn't it? Like, that just makes sense. When you read that, you're like, man, that really does kind of hit home with me. Like, that really makes sense. Kids and adults both. I want you to seriously think about this question. What people are in your circle? Who are you spending time with? What people are you allowing to get so close to you and have an influence on your life? And are the people in your circle, are they bringing you closer to Christ, or are they pulling you away from Him? Are the people in your circle bringing you closer to Christ? And that's the goal for every relationship, by the way. Are the people in your circle bringing you toward Christ, or are they pulling you away from Him? If you ever come to the conclusion that someone is pulling you away from Christ, guess what it's time to do? It's time to make sure that person's not in your circle anymore, because it's not worth it for any friendship to lose the one thing in the world that matters more than anything in the world. I don't know about you, but I'll tell you what kind of friends that I want, and I'm blessed that I have these kind of friends. I want the kind of friends that we read about in Mark chapter 2. I want the kind of friends that we read about in Mark chapter 2 that wanted to get their friend to Jesus so bad that they climb up on the roof of this building because there were so many people gathered around Christ they couldn't get into Jesus. I want the kind of friends like in Mark chapter 2, climb up on the roof of the building and they cut a hole in the roof and they lower their friend down to Jesus. That's the kind of friend that I want in my life. Who you spend time with matters. The people in your circle matter, no matter how strong you are. If you are continually putting yourself in a situation to be around foolish people, guess what's going to happen? You too will find eventually that you will start to make foolish decisions. I spent way too much time on that first point, and I knew that I would. So let's go on to the second. Second fact about fools tonight. Fools don't receive instruction. In Proverbs chapter 1, starting in verse 5, it says, "A wise person will hear and increase in learning, and a person of understanding will acquire wise counsel." To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. There's so much to unpack in these few verses that I couldn't possibly unpack it all right now. But there's just a few things in this passage that I think we should point out together. In verse 5, it says, "A wise person will hear and increase in learning." Church, I hope that you never reach a point in your life where you're tired of learning. I hope that you never reach a point in your life where you're satisfied with your Bible knowledge and you say, I don't really need to learn anymore. I've learned enough. I hope you never reach that point in your life where the fire's put out and you're tired of learning. But he keeps going. He says, "And a person of understanding will acquire wise counsel." What is counsel? It's advice. It's advice. It's when you go to a person and you say, "Hey, how do I handle this situation? How do I do this thing? How do I do this the right way? How do I say this the right way? How do I go about this the right way?" You acquire counsel. He says, "A person of understanding will acquire wise counsel." In verse 7, when it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, you've probably heard that verse several times, but I want you to notice the latter part of verse 7. It says, "Fools despise wisdom and instruction." No matter how long you've been a Christian, you never ever stop learning from other people. We're always in need of wisdom from other people, are we not? I know I need it daily. I need it daily. But here's the problem with that, by the way. Here's why foolish people don't receive instruction. It's because receiving instruction sometimes is not the easiest thing in the world to do. Like, can we just be honest with ourselves? I remember when I first started preaching specifically, and it's funny, when I first started preaching, it's like I had no earthly idea what I wanted to do. But after hearing how young I was and how little I knew over and over and over and over again, eventually, let me tell you what happened. Eventually, my heart was kind of hardened by that to the point where I didn't want to seek advice from anybody. I wanted to do it my way. I wanted to do my things my way, and I didn't want somebody to tell me how to do it. Even though, guess what? And I know you're saying, well, you're still a young guy. I understand I'm 25 years old, but I'm talking when I was a 19, 20-year-old kid doing ministry full time. I had no idea what I was doing, but let me tell you, I reached a point where I didn't want somebody to tell me. Because like I said, when you're told over and over and over again that you're undeserving or that you're inadequate, guess what starts to happen? First of all, you start to believe it. And second of all, pride starts to swell up in you to such a point you don't want anyone to tell you anything. As a hitter, guess what I did not like to hear? You need to adjust this in your swing. You need to fix this. You need to do this. That was the worst thing to hear. You don't like it. Why? Because you want somebody to tell you how good your swing looks. You want somebody to tell you that you're really getting your hands through the ball and that you're really hitting the ball around well. That's what you want somebody to tell you. But it's not so easy when somebody tells you all the hours, all the work you've put in is still not quite enough. You still need to fix this thing. I think about Jesus' conversation with a rich young man, and I know there's a lot to that, his love for his money and riches. But it's so amazing to me that when he asked Jesus what he needed to do, and Jesus is talking about all these things, all these commandments, what commandments must I keep? And Jesus is mentioning all of these list of commandments that he needed to keep. And the rich young man, upon hearing them, he says, man, that's good news. I've been keeping all of these from my youth. This is great. But what am I still lacking? What am I still lacking? And Jesus says to go and sell all that he had and give it to the poor and come and follow him. And the rich man went away sorrowful, for he was one who owned much property. I think about that. There's obviously this idea of a love of wealth, but guess what else I think there's got to be some part of in that story that really happened, by the way. It's not some fairy tale, but in that story, I can't help but think this idea of this rich young man saying, I've done all of these great things my whole life, and it's still not good enough. Like, I'm still not good enough to follow Jesus right now as I am. Isn't that easy for us to do? Like, to get to a point where it's like, I've done enough, I'm doing enough, I study enough, I know enough. I think it's so fascinating that even professional athletes have coaches. You ever notice that? Even Major League Baseball players have hitting coaches and pitching coaches. Why is that? Fielding coaches. It's because no matter how good you get at the sport, there's always something that you can be better at. NBA players still have guys that work them out before every game. Why? Because no matter how good of a shooter you are, you can always better yourself. I can guarantee you this. Steph Curry's not the kind of guy to be missing shoot-around practices with his coaches. Okay? He's not. He's the greatest shooter in the history of the world. If you're sitting there going, I don't know who that is, you got to get with it, okay? You got to get out from under whatever rock you've been buried under. Steph Curry's the greatest shooter in the history of the world, but I know for a fact, or I would like to think, based upon what I've seen, what I've read, social media, all that good stuff, that Steph Curry is not the kind of guy that says, I don't need coaches anymore. You see the point, church? You're always in need of instruction. But the problem happens. This is when it gets really, really hard. It's not just, hey, I think you could do this, I think you could do this. It's those situations in life where you know you messed up, and someone comes and talks to you about it. Is that not so hard? You ever had to do that? Here just this last week, and I'm just going to be honest with you, I wouldn't say names. I had to call somebody that I've known most of my life and tell this person that she wasn't coming to church camp this summer. It's a person I've known most all of my life, a person who had a huge impact on my faith when I was younger, and now in my situation, I had to call this person and say, hey, I'm sorry, but I'm not using you as a counselor this summer. Do you know how difficult that is? For both sides. Like, it's hard to call the person, but can you imagine being the person on the other end of the phone, hearing this from somebody you love, saying, hey, I'm sorry, but there's just too many things you need to work on? That's hard. It's hard to hear that there are things that you need to work on. It's hard to hear that you've messed up and you have somebody that cares about you. I hope that you do. I hope that when you mess up, that you have someone who cares enough about you to come to you and talk to you about your mistake and say, here's what you might should have done, or here's what you could do better, and always, always out of love. It's so hard to hear that you make mistakes, because as human beings, we don't like to hear that we make mistakes. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 17 says, "One who is on the path of life follows instruction, but the one who ignores a rebuke goes astray." There are times in your life when you're going to be in need of a rebuke. It happens to me all the time. Chase, you're doing this thing, and you got to quit doing this thing, and you need to do this thing. It's just how it goes. There are times in your life where you're going to be needing rebuke. And this proverb says, the one who ignores a rebuke goes astray. It takes a lot of courage to go to somebody and point out where their fault is, and not point out in such a way saying, hey, you gotta fix this, like you're messing up, like I'm tired of dealing with this. But I'm saying a person who says, hey, I love you too much to not come talk to you about this. I hope that you have those people, but it's hard to hear. Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 10 says, a single rebuke does more for a person of understanding than 100 lashes on the back of a fool. It's hard to be told that there are things we need to work on, but it's so important. Fools, if you want to be foolish tonight, when someone cares enough about you to come and talk to you about some area of your life that you need to be better in, out of love, when that happens, if you want to be foolish, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. Let it go in one ear, out the other. Don't want to hear from anyone else. You ever know people that don't like criticism at all? Like at the first sign of criticism, even no matter how constructive it is, that they shut down on you, like they don't want you to help them. They don't want. A single rebuke does more for a person of understanding than 100 lashes on the back of a fool. Fools don't receive instruction. Number 3, third fact about fools tonight. Fools are quickly angered. Now here's where I come into play. And what I mean by here's where I come into play, I mean, here's where I find me in this list of facts about foolish people. If I had to say one thing in my life that I've struggled at more than any other aspect of my life, specifically when I was a little younger, but even now at times, it's not being quickly angered. It's so crazy to me that all it takes is a few seconds of anger to say something or do something that you will feel the effects of for years and years and years. Isn't that crazy? Like all it takes is a moment where you let Satan win. I mean a moment of foolishness that you act out in anger to ruin a relationship or to cause such damaging effects that you're still feeling the effects of it years and years later. It happens. How many times have you mishandled a conversation when anger wasn't involved at all? Probably not many. When we tend to mishandle situations and conversations is when we're angry, is it not? When you're hurt, when you're angry, when you're frustrated, like that's when you make the mistake. And so as I look at this, and I read so many Proverbs, we're going to look at 2, but there's so many Proverbs that talk about how foolish it is to be hot-tempered. I'll tell you one thing, I come from a family where the slightest ounce of somebody saying anything to you, about you, or doing whatever, like I come from a family where it was just like, it was drilled in your mind that you're looking for a fight at any time because no one gets the best of you. Like that's the kind of family I come from. Maybe you can relate. Like my family's the kind of family where people are going to be in the front yard fighting during a family event just because that's just what they do. Like they just fight because that's how they deal with their anger. And then afterwards they're fine. But they get angry and they throw down, do all kinds of stupid stuff. If you want to be foolish tonight, let your anger get the best of you. And I'm going to tell you, this is so hard. There have been so many times in my life, and I'm going to be even more specific than that. There have been so many times specifically in my marriage, where I've let anger get the best of me, and I say things that I know I would never say, and I handle things in such a way that I know I never would otherwise. And let me tell you, when you let your anger get the best of you, and then you're sitting there in the aftermath of a fight or an argument, and you're feeling about this big because you know how dumb it is to let your anger get the best of you, that is not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling. Because you know in that moment, no matter how big the argument, no matter how small, you know in that moment, you know that Satan just won. You know that that's his victory. I think about how many people I've hurt. I think about how many relationships that I've messed up. I think about all the times where I caused so much damage because I couldn't get my anger under control. Because I didn't know how to think and pray before I spoke or before I acted, before I dealt with a situation. Foolish people are quickly angered. In Proverbs 14 and verse 17, short-tempered people do foolish things. Let's stop right there. That makes sense, doesn't it? Like, that makes sense. That pretty much sums it up. Short-tempered people do foolish things. But he goes on. He says, and schemers are hated. Schemers are hated. People who are scheming up ways to do bad things. Short-tempered people do foolish things. Or how about this one in chapter 12 and verse 16, where it says, a fool is quick-tempered. Again, how much simpler can he put it? He says, a fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. I'm going to read that one again because I think we need that one tonight. A fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. How does it feel to be insulted? When someone belittles you. And sometimes it's called for, and sometimes it's not. How does it make you feel when somebody has something bad to say about you? How does it make you feel when somebody insults you and they call you whatever it is? And I'm not even going to begin to go into specific situations because there's countless situations where this happens. But I want you to think about what happens when people insult you or people have bad things to say about you. I want you to ask yourself, how do I handle situations where people have bad things to say about me? How do I handle situations where people mishandle it? And this is the problem, church, by the way. When people mishandle situations, what do we think it's okay for us to do? We think it's okay then for us to also mishandle the situation. Have you noticed, I'm not the brightest guy in the world. I'm far from that. But have you ever noticed that when you pour fuel on the fire, it doesn't make it go away? Have you ever noticed that? Like when you're in that conversation and you throw fuel on the fire and you keep the argument going, have you ever noticed that it doesn't make the argument go away? It only makes it worse. And this, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I am so far from a finished product in this area, but I can speak from experience. If you want to pray about something and you really want to see God work in something, when you begin to pray that God help you in your hot-headedness, your short-temperedness, watch Him work, because it can happen. I've seen it so many times. I've seen it in my own life. I have flashes and I have times where I still am not good at this, but I think about how many ways and how many times I've seen the goodness of God in action. A fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. How do you handle people who say horrible things about you? How do you handle when people belittle you? If you want to handle it in a very foolish way, be quick-tempered. It's all about recognizing that the anger is there and having the wisdom to step back from the situation, remove yourself from the situation, and give yourself some time. You know something I have a really hard time with? It's when my wife says, hey, I'm not ready to talk about this right now. Give me a little bit and we'll talk about it later. You know how wise that is? Like, there's so much wisdom in that. But me being who I am, what happens when there's something you want to talk about and get handled? You're like, no. We're going to talk about it right now. Like, we're going to handle it right now. When in reality, if you stop and think about it, there's so much wisdom in going, hey, we're going to say stupid things right now. Let's give it some time and we'll talk about it later. A fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm even when insulted. If you want to be foolish tonight, be quickly angered. Be perfectly content letting yourself have moments of anger. Be perfectly content letting yourself have a short temper and flying off the handle at people. Guys, so much damage can be done so quickly if you let your anger get the best of you. Learn how to step away from the situation. And number fourth fact tonight about fools. Fools always say what's on their mind. Fools always say what's on their mind. Proverbs chapter 17, in verse 27, it says, a truly wise person uses few words. I'm already in danger, and we hadn't even got through the first verse yet. A truly wise person uses few words, A person with understanding is even-tempered. It's funny that came up again. In verse 28, it says, even fools are thought wise when they keep silent. With their mouths shut, they seem intelligent. You've probably heard the saying before, right? That it's better to keep your mouth shut and everyone think you're a fool than to open your mouth and confirm it. You ever heard that before? That's so true. It is so much better to keep your mouth shut and let people make their assumptions than it is to open your mouth and prove them right. Fools always say what's on their mind. And I'm going to go ahead and dive into this because it wouldn't be right of us to talk about this subject and not talk about something very, very, very specifically. I hate what social media has become. I do. I hate what social media has become. And for some of you sitting there going, social media, Facebook, how about that? You're familiar with that? Maybe you're not on Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Used to it was Twitter, that's where all the drama was. But now it seems like Facebook is the place where people battle it out all the time. You ever been scrolling through Facebook and you see somebody post something and you know the reason they posted it was to see how many people they can upset? And as bad as that is, you know what's even worse? When I go to looking at the comments and I see names of brothers and sisters in Christ jumping in, weighing in on conversations on Facebook in a really, really terrible way. Church, can I just say this? What you put on Facebook is a big deal. Like, you're an ambassador for Christ in every aspect of your life. And when you talk to people that feel the need to be a keyboard warrior and to jump in the comments of every single post, whether it's on, I don't know, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, when you talk to those people about why did you do that, you know what they say most of the time? I felt the need to speak my mind on something that pertains to me. I say, this pertains to me, this affects me, and I felt the need to say what's on my mind. If you want to be foolish tonight, become the kind of person that if it's in your head, everyone else is going to know. Everyone else is going to know what you're thinking. If you want to be foolish, be the kind of person that doesn't know when to seal their lips. Be the kind of person that at the first sign of anger, let it go. That is a very quick way to find yourself being foolish. I think about all the huge battles. I'm telling you, like I said, as I look around, I know there's some of you going, I have no idea what the heck you're talking about. That's okay. I would say a majority of us know exactly what I'm talking about. I've seen so many friendships come to an end over some stupid Facebook post. I've seen so many people leave churches over some stupid Facebook post. Like, I've seen so many terrible, terrible things happen in churches because church members wouldn't stay off social media long enough to learn about what God's will for their life really is. So many bad things happen because we feel this need to always speak what's on our mind. Church, there's a time when we have to be willing to keep our mouth shut. And we have to be willing to say, you know what? And this is just a question that I always ask myself, and it's been drilled in my mind by Curtis and so many of my mentors, but it's always been drilled in my mind that before you say whatever you're about to say, or before you do whatever you're about to do, that you think, what kind of impact is what I'm about to say or do going to have on the person that I'm dealing with? And you're like, well, duh, that sounds obvious. I mean, you really think about it. I'm talking even in a situation where you're looking at somebody else and you're going, well, they're wrong. They're wrong, and I know they're wrong, and maybe you're right. Maybe they're wrong, and maybe you're right. But even in a situation where a person is wrong and you are right, there can still be situations where you need to keep your mouth shut because you will only further damage the situation. You know what I'm saying? Even when you're saying, I'm biblical, like I'm in the right, like I know my stuff, there is still so much wisdom in going, hey, there's a time and a place for these conversations. And right here publicly in front of everybody is probably not it. Or right here on Facebook is probably not it. How do I handle situations where I feel the need to speak with somebody about something? If you want to be foolish tonight, always say what's on your mind. I know a lot of people who are loved by so many. And I say, man, I just love so-and-so because they're not afraid to speak what's on their mind. I'm not telling you to be afraid to speak what's on your mind. I'm telling you to be wise about how you do it and when you do it. Fools always reveal what's on their mind. And according to Proverbs, where there are many words, sin is inevitable. Where there are lengthy conversations and discussions and debates, bad things tend to happen. Tonight, I want to ask you this. Do you want to be foolish? Or do you want to be wise? Do you want to gain wisdom? And like I said, you can fill in the blank, fool, stupid, idiot, dummy, I don't care. You fill in the blank with whatever word tends to resonate with you. I think that it's so important for us to understand that God has a will for our life. And that everything God ever told us to do or not to do, He did so for our benefit. Every single thing that God ever told us to do, He did so that we would have the greatest life possible, and so that our life would be a reflection of Him, and so that we would give glory and honor to Him. And tonight I want to reach out to those who are saying, maybe I haven't been living the life that God wants me to live. Or maybe the person that says, hey, I've never given my life to Christ in the first place. We can take care of that as well. Whatever your need, we ask tonight that you come forward as we stand and sing.